The crystal chandelier above our table caught the light in fragments, scattering tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. I traced one with my fingertip, focusing on the colors rather than on Mark's voice, which had taken on that familiar edge, the one that appeared whenever we were in public. "Emma, for God's sake, can you at least pretend to have an opinion?" He sighed, swirling the wine in his glass with practiced precision. "The waiters asked you twice what you want." I looked up, startled to find the waiter standing beside our table, pen poised above his small notepad. How long had he been there? The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. La Riviera was Mark's choice, always Mark's choice, with its white tablecloths and waiters in bow ties who seemed to materialize and vanish like well-dressed ghosts. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my cheeks burning. "I'll have the salmon, please." "The salmon," Mark repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. "The same thing you ordered last time, and the time before that." He smiled at the waiter. "She has the culinary imagination of a 5-year-old. The waiter's expression remained carefully neutral, though I thought I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes before he nodded and slipped away. Humiliation coiled in my stomach, tight and familiar. I reached for my water glass with trembling fingers. "I like the salmon here," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "What you like is being boring and predictable." Mark leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We're having dinner with the Harringtons next week. My future depends on that partnership, Em. You need to be more, I don't know, present, engaging. Sometimes I think I'm dining with a ghost." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. This was our ritual now, his disappointment. My apologies. When had it started? Somewhere between the eager yes to his proposal 6 months ago and the gradual realization that the diamond on my finger felt increasingly like a shackle rather than a promise. It hadn't always been this way. In the beginning, Mark had been charmed by my quietness, had called me his thoughtful angel. Now that angel had become a burden, weighing down his ascent in the cutthroat world of corporate law. The restaurant buzzed around us, conversations and laughter swelling and receding like waves. I let my gaze drift past Mark's shoulder, seeking a momentary escape. That's when I saw him. He sat alone at a corner table, partially obscured by a tasteful arrangement of orchids. But even in that shadowed corner, he commanded attention. Not by demanding it like Mark, but by seeming utterly indifferent to it. Dark hair, impeccably styled, a suit that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. Strong hands wrapped around a tumbler of amber liquid. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up. The air between us seemed to crackle with sudden electricity. His eyes were dark, so dark I couldn't distinguish pupil from iris, and they held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. There was something almost predatory in that gaze, something that should have made me look away immediately. I didn't. "Are you even listening to me?" Mark's sharp voice severed the connection. I blinked, turning back to him. "Sorry, I was just daydreaming again." He reached across the table and took my hand, his grip just tight enough to hurt. "Look, I know you're nervous about the wedding, but I need you focused, Emma. My career is at a critical point." A subtle movement caught my eye. A man in a dark suit had appeared at the corner table, leaning down to whisper something to the stranger. The stranger nodded once, never taking his eyes from our table. No, not our table. From me. "You should wear the blue dress to the Harringtons," Mark continued. "The black makes you look washed out, and frankly, you need all the help you can get. Maybe schedule a hair appointment too." Each word landed like a tiny dart. I used to deflect them, used to believe I was imagining the cruelty beneath his helpful suggestions. Now I just absorbed them silently, collecting wounds like souvenirs. "Mark," I said, my voice stronger than I expected, "do you even want to marry me anymore?" His expression flickered, surprise, then annoyance. "What kind of question is that? We've got the venue booked, the invitation sent." He squeezed my hand harder. "Cold feet are normal, Em, but let's not do this here." "That's not an answer." The words escaped before I could stop them. Mark's face hardened. "You're being ridiculous. Again." Our food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. The salmon gleamed pink and perfect on my plate, but my appetite had vanished. I picked up my fork anyway, going through the motions. "I've been thinking," Mark said between precise bites of his steak. "Maybe you should consider quitting that library job after the wedding. It barely pays anything, and honestly, it's not like you need the—" "No." The word burst from me, surprising us both. Mark set down his fork. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I'm not quitting my job." My heart hammered against my ribs. But something had shifted inside me. Perhaps it was the weight of all the tiny cruelties, finally becoming too heavy to bear. Or perhaps it was the lingering sensation of those dark eyes, watching me from across the room, seeing me in a way Mark never had. "Your job shelving books is hardly a career, Emma. Be realistic." "Those books saved me after my parents died," I said, my voice low but steady. "That library was the only place that felt like home." Mark rolled his eyes. "God, you're always so dramatic about your parents. It's been 8 years. The words hit like a physical blow. I felt something crack inside me, some final thread of hope that the man I'd fallen in love with still existed beneath this polished, cruel stranger. I pushed my chair back. "I need a moment." "Emma, don't make a scene." But I was already moving, threading my way through the tables toward the restrooms at the back of the restaurant. My vision blurred with unshed tears as I pushed through the door marked, "Ladies," grateful to find it empty. I gripped the marble counter, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Pale face, wide blue eyes rimmed with smudged mascara. I barely recognized myself. "What are you doing?" I whispered to my reflection. "Why are you still with him?" I knew the answer, though I hated to admit it. Fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over at 28. Fear that Mark was right, that I was too quiet, too dull, too damaged to be loved properly. I splashed cold water on my face, careful not to ruin what remained of my makeup. I couldn't hide in here forever. Mark would be getting impatient, and an impatient Mark meant a cutting Mark. I dried my hands and took a deep breath, preparing my apology. When I emerged, I nearly collided with a broad chest. "Excuse me," I murmured, stepping back. No need to apologize. The voice was deep, with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. I looked up and felt my breath catch. It was him. The man from the corner table. Up close, he was even more striking. Strong jawline dusted with perfect stubble. Those same dark, fathomless eyes. A scar, thin and white, tracing the edge of his left eyebrow. A small distance behind him stood the man in the dark suit I'd noticed earlier. His posture alert, eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "Are you all right?" the stranger asked. The question, asked with such quiet intensity, almost undid me. When was the last time anyone had asked me that and actually wanted the truth? "I'm fine," I said automatically. Just needed a moment. His eyes, so dark they were almost black, studied my face. "He doesn't deserve your tears." My heart stuttered. I don't know what you mean." A small, knowing smile curved his lips. "I think you do." He reached into his jacket and produced a crisp white handkerchief. "You missed a spot," he said, gesturing to the corner of my eye. I took it, our fingers brushing. An electric current seemed to pass between us, making my skin tingle. "Thank you," I whispered. "Dominic," he said, not a question, an offering. "His name?" "Emma," I replied. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Interest. "Emma," he repeated as if tasting the word. "It suits you." I should have excused myself then. Should have returned to Mark. Should have forgotten this strange, charged moment in a restaurant hallway with a dangerous-looking stranger. Instead, I stood frozen, caught in Dominic's gravity. "Your fiancé is coming," he said suddenly, though he hadn't glanced away from my face. Sure enough, I heard Mark's irritated voice calling my name from the dining room. "I should go," I said, clutching the handkerchief. Dominic stepped aside, but as I moved past him, he spoke again, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "A man who truly values a woman doesn't diminish her in public or in private." Before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing through a door marked private that I hadn't noticed before. I stood there, his words echoing in my mind, until Mark rounded the corner. "What are you doing back here? Our food's getting cold." He grabbed my elbow, steering me back toward our table. "I swear, Emma, sometimes it's like you go out of your way to embarrass me." I let him lead me, but something had changed. I felt it in the straight line of my spine, in the steady beat of my heart, as if the brief encounter with Dominic had awakened something I'd kept buried for too long. We returned to our table. My salmon sat untouched, no longer appealing. Mark resumed eating as if nothing had happened, launching into a story about his latest courtroom victory. I nodded at appropriate intervals, but my attention kept drifting to the corner table. It was empty now. A waiter appeared at my elbow, refilling my water glass. "Compliments of the gentleman," he said quietly, placing a folded napkin beside my plate before gliding away. I waited until Mark was distracted by his phone before unfolding it. Inside, written in bold, elegant script, "Your cage has a door, little bird. The question is whether you're brave enough to fly." No signature. None needed. I refolded the napkin and slipped it into my purse, my heart racing. When I looked up, Mark was watching me, suspicion narrowing his eyes. "What was that?" he demanded. "Just a napkin," I said. "I spilled some water." He stared at me a moment longer, then shook his head. "Finish your food. We need to get going." I picked up my fork and took a small bite of salmon, no longer tasting it. My mind was filled with dark eyes and that strange, charged moment in the hallway. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Mark paid the bill, complaining about the price. As we stood to leave, his hand possessive on the small of my back, I cast one last glance around the restaurant. In a shadowed corner near the bar, I glimpsed Dominic. He was speaking to an older man who listened with deference, nodding frequently. Several men in dark suits hovered nearby. Even from across the room, I could feel the power radiating from him. Not the brittle, performative authority Mark wielded, but something deeper, more dangerous. As if feeling my gaze, Dominic looked up. Our eyes locked for the second time that night. He raised his glass in a subtle toast, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Mark's grip tightened on my waist. "Come on," he muttered. "Stop gawking." We were almost at the door when a commotion behind us made us turn. A waiter had tripped, sending a tray of drinks crashing to the floor. Mark snorted with derision, but I froze, my eyes widening. Because in the chaos, I saw what no one else seemed to notice. The accident had occurred right in front of Dominic's table, blocking the path of a man who had been heading directly toward us, a man whose hand had been reaching inside his jacket. Now that man was being quietly but firmly escorted toward the kitchen by two of Dominic's suits. A chill ran down my spine. What had just happened? "Let's go," Mark said, oblivious, pulling me through the door into the cool night air. As we stepped outside, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver's window lowered, revealing the face of the man who had been standing guard behind Dominic earlier. He nodded once at me, his expression impassive, before driving away. "Crazy traffic tonight," Mark muttered, flagging down a taxi. I said nothing, my mind reeling. Who was Dominic? What had I stumbled into with that simple, fateful glance across a crowded restaurant? The taxi arrived. Mark opened the door, then turned to me with impatience. "Well? Are you getting in, or what?" I hesitated, one foot on the curb, one in the street. In that moment, I felt suspended between two lives. The safe, predictable prison I knew, and something wild and unknown. Dominic's words echoed in my mind. "Your cage has a door, little bird." But before I could decide, before I could even draw breath, another black car screeched to a halt beside us. The back door flew open, and suddenly Mark was on the ground, blood trickling from his nose, and Dominic was standing over him, his expression coldly furious. "You don't speak to her that way," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Not ever again." Mark scrambled backward, his eyes wide with shock and fear. Who the hell are you?" Dominic ignored him, turning to me. In the harsh glow of the streetlight, he looked like something from another world, dangerous and beautiful and utterly terrifying. Emma, he said, his voice gentler now, I think it's time you made a choice. He extended his hand toward me as people froze on the sidewalk around us, as Mark sputtered threats about calling the police, as my heart thundered in my chest. He doesn't deserve you, Dominic said quietly. Come with me. I stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that whatever I decided next would change everything forever. Time seemed to stand still on that sidewalk. Behind me, a taxi idled with its door open. Before me, Dominic's hand remained extended, an invitation or perhaps a dare. And at my feet, Mark was scrambling to his knees, blood trickling from his nose, his face twisted with rage and fear. Emma, don't be stupid, Mark spat, his voice nasal from the blow. You don't know who this man is. I didn't. Not really. But in that moment, I realized I didn't know who Mark was anymore either. Or perhaps I finally saw who he had been all along. Sir. A deep voice came from behind Dominic. One of his men stood there, gesturing suddenly toward the street. We need to move. Dominic's eyes never left mine. Your choice, Emma. But it needs to be now. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at me to step back, to apologize to Mark, to retreat into the cage I knew. But another part of me, a part buried so deep I'd almost forgotten it existed, whispered that some cages were worse than the unknown. I reached out and placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong. Something flashed in his eyes, triumph, relief. I couldn't tell. Without a word, he guided me toward the waiting car. You're making a huge mistake, Mark shouted, his voice cracking. Emma, I'll call the police. Dominic paused, turning back to Mark with a look that made my blood run cold. That would be unwise. The words were soft, almost gentle, yet carried a threat so palpable it seemed to electrify the air. The man I'd been planning to marry fell silent, his face draining of color. Dominic guided me into the car's plush leather back seat before sliding in beside me. The door closed with a soft, expensive thunk. Inside, the world became instantly muted, the soundproofing so complete that the chaos of the street scene disappeared as if someone had pressed mute on a television. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding into the flow of traffic. I stared at my hands, now trembling in my lap. What had I done? You're safe, Dominic said, as if reading my thoughts. I won't hurt you. I looked up at him. In the dim interior of the car, shadows played across his face, accentuating the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze. Who are you? I whispered. A small smile curved his lips. You already know my name. That's not what I meant. His smile faded. He studied me for a long moment as if deciding something. I'm someone who recognizes value when others don't, he finally said. Someone who doesn't like to see beautiful things damaged. A chill ran down my spine, not from fear, though perhaps it should have been, but from the way his eyes seemed to see through all my carefully constructed walls. You assaulted my fiancé, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Former fiancé, he corrected. And yes, I did. Are you upset about that? The question caught me off guard with its directness. Was I upset? I should have been outraged, horrified. Instead, I felt nothing. No, that wasn't quite true. I felt relief. The realization shamed me. I don't know, I admitted. Dominic nodded, seeming satisfied with my honesty. He turned to look out the window, giving me a moment to gather my thoughts. The city lights streaked past, blurring like watercolors. I didn't recognize the neighborhood we were entering. Sleek high-rises and exclusive boutiques replacing the familiar landmarks of my daily life. Everything about this situation screamed danger. I'd gotten into a car with a stranger. A man who had just assaulted Mark without hesitation. A man surrounded by what could only be described as bodyguards. Yet somehow, I felt calmer than I had in months. Where are we going? I finally asked. Somewhere we can talk properly. His eyes returned to mine. I have a penthouse nearby, but if that makes you uncomfortable, we can go elsewhere. The offer of choice surprised me. Why are you doing this? He was silent for so long that I thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, I saw something in you. Something familiar. What? a prisoner who had forgotten the door was unlocked. He leaned slightly closer, his scent enveloping me, expensive cologne with notes of sandalwood and something darker, more primal. "I've been there, Emma. Long ago." The car slowed, turning into a private driveway beneath a towering luxury building. A security guard nodded respectfully as we passed, raising a gate without question. "We're here," Dominic said. "My home. But the choice remains yours. Say the word, and my driver will take you anywhere you want to go." I should have asked to be taken home. Back to the small apartment I shared with Mark. Back to the life I knew, broken as it was. Instead, I heard myself say, "I want to talk." Something like satisfaction flickered across his face. He nodded once. The car stopped, and his door was opened by one of his men, the same one who had been standing guard at the restaurant. The night air was cool against my skin as I followed Dominic into a private elevator, its interior lined with mirrors and soft golden light. His bodyguard remained outside, taking a different elevator. As we ascended, I caught my reflection. Cheeks flushed, eyes wide, still wearing the navy dress Mark had deemed acceptable for tonight's dinner. Standing next to Dominic's imposing figure, I looked small, fragile. His eyes met mine in the mirror, having second thoughts. "About 50 of them," I admitted. He laughed then, the sound surprisingly warm. Honesty, refreshing. The elevator opened directly into a foyer of creamy marble and subtle lighting. Beyond it stretched a vast living space with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a panoramic view of the city lights below. The space was elegant but masculine. Leather, steel, and dark wood dominating the color scheme. "Make yourself comfortable," Dominic said, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over a chair. Beneath it, his crisp white shirt stretched across broad shoulders. A shoulder holster held what was unmistakably a gun. I froze, my eyes fixed on the weapon. "I should have warned you," he said, following my gaze. He removed the holster with practiced ease, setting it on a shelf near the entrance. "Better?" I nodded, though my heart still raced. This was madness. I should leave immediately. Yet I found myself moving further into the apartment, drawn to the breathtaking view. The city sprawled below like a carpet of jewels, familiar yet strange from this height. How different the world looked from up here, above it all. "Would you like a drink?" Dominic asked, moving to a bar area tucked against one wall. "Water, please." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He poured water into a crystal glass for me and scotch for himself, then gestured toward a seating area near the windows. I perched on the edge of a leather sofa, cradling my water between my palms. Dominic sat across from me, his movements fluid and controlled. He didn't crowd me or try to sit too close, a courtesy that paradoxically made me even more aware of his presence. "You have questions," he said. Not a question, but a statement. "A million of them." I took a sip of water. "Let's start with the obvious. Are you involved in organized crime?" He raised an eyebrow, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "Straight to the point. I like that." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "I have business interests in many sectors. Some operate in gray areas." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now." His eyes held mine. "But I promise you this. You are in no danger from me, ever." Something in his voice, an intensity, a sincerity, made me believe him, against all logic. "Why me?" I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since our eyes first met across the restaurant. "Why did you intervene?" Dominic set his glass down, leaning forward slightly. "The first time I saw you, you were looking at your reflection in that spoon." I blinked, confused. "What?" "At the restaurant, before you noticed me. You picked up your spoon and looked at your reflection. And do you know what I saw?" He paused. "I saw you practice your smile. 3 times, like you were trying to get it right, like you needed to be prepared." My cheeks burned with embarrassment. I had done that. An old habit from childhood, preparing myself for social situations that always made me anxious. I hadn't realized anyone had noticed. "Then he spoke to you," Dominic continued, his voice hardening. "I watched your light dim with every word. I've seen that look before, on my mother's face years ago, when my father would criticize her at the dinner table. His jaw tightened. I was too young to stop it then. I swallowed hard. So, what? I'm some kind of rescue project? A chance to save someone like your mother? No. The word was sharp, definitive. You're nothing like her. She never fought back. His eyes held mine. But you were starting to. I saw it in your eyes when you questioned him about the wedding. You just needed someone to see your worth. I looked away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. You don't know me. I know enough. He leaned back, giving me space again. I know you work at a library, a job you love for reasons beyond money. I know you lost your parents 8 years ago. I know you've been slowly disappearing inside that relationship. My head snapped up. How do you know all that? I listened, at the restaurant. A small, almost apologetic smile. I have good hearing. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the comfortable temperature of the room. This is a lot. I don't even know what I'm doing here. Taking control of your life perhaps for the first time, Dominic suggested quietly, making a choice that wasn't safe or expected. His words struck a chord so deep within me that I almost gasped. Wasn't that exactly what I'd done? For years, I'd made the safe choice, the expected choice. After my parents' death, I'd clung to routine and predictability like a lifeline. Mark had seemed like the safest choice of all. Stable, successful, certain of his place in the world. When had safe become suffocating? I should call someone, I said suddenly. My friend Lisa will be worried when she hears what happened. Of course. Dominic retrieved my purse from where I'd set it down and handed it to me. Use my phone if you prefer. Your fiancé might try tracking yours. The thought hadn't occurred to me, and the fact that it had occurred to him was both concerning and oddly comforting. I took out my own phone anyway, seeing 3 missed calls from Mark and a barrage of texts ranging from furious demands to return home immediately to bizarre apologies mixed with threats. My finger hovered over Lisa's contact information, but I hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, I left Mark at a restaurant after a stranger punched him, and now I'm in that stranger's penthouse. It sounded insane even in my head. I set the phone down without calling. Second thoughts? Dominic asked. More like 15th thoughts. I managed a small, shaky laugh. This doesn't feel real. Reality has a way of surprising us. He stood and moved to the window, looking out over the city. Sometimes opportunities appear when we least expect them, disguised as impossible choices. He glanced back at me. Sometimes freedom feels like falling. I joined him at the window, keeping a careful distance between us. From this height, the cars below looked like toys, the people like ants. How easy it would be to feel like a god up here, removed from the concerns of ordinary life. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That depends on you. Dominic turned to face me fully. I can have my driver take you anywhere you want to go. Your home, a hotel, a friend's house, or you can stay in my guest suite tonight, with the door locked from the inside, and decide your next move in the morning. I studied his face, searching for deceit or hidden motives. I found none, only that same intense focus that had first caught my attention across the restaurant. Why would you offer that? You don't know me either. Perhaps I'd like to. His voice was low, almost intimate, sending a shiver down my spine. Or perhaps I simply recognized someone at a crossroads. I've stood there myself. A knock at the door interrupted us. Dominic moved to answer it, speaking briefly with one of his men before returning with a sleek leather overnight bag. Some essentials, he explained. Toiletries, night clothes, a change of clothes for tomorrow. My assistant is quite efficient. I raised an eyebrow. Your assistant keeps women's clothing on hand? For the first time, Dominic looked almost embarrassed. She purchased them just now. I texted her your size. How did you know my size? I pay attention. He set the bag down. The guest suite is through there if you decide to stay. The door locks as I mentioned. The kitchen is fully stocked if you're hungry. I glanced toward the doorway he'd indicated, then back at him. If I stay, what do you want from me? Dominic's expression grew serious. Nothing you don't choose to give freely, He took a step closer, not touching me but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I want to know you, Emma. The real you. Not the ghost that man was turning you into. His words stripped me bare, exposing nerves I'd thought long numbed. And if there's nothing to know, if that ghost is all that's left. I don't believe that. His voice was soft but certain. I saw you, remember? Before you noticed me. I saw your strength when you finally stood up to him. My phone buzzed again on the coffee table. Another call from Mark. Dominic glanced at it, then back to me. Stay tonight, he said. As my guest, nothing more. In the morning, if you want to return to him, I won't stop you. And if I don't want to return to him, something flickered in his eyes, something possessive, almost predatory. Then perhaps we can discuss other arrangements. I should have been frightened by that look. Instead, I felt a rush of heat that had nothing to do with fear. I'll stay, I heard myself say. Just for tonight. Dominic nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. The right choice, I think. He gestured toward the guest suite. Make yourself comfortable. I have some business to attend to, but I'll be here if you need anything. I picked up the overnight bag and moved toward the doorway, pausing to look back at him. Dominic? Yes. Thank you. For seeing me. Something softened in his expression, a vulnerability I hadn't expected to see in such a powerful man. Always, Emma. From the first moment, as I closed the guest room door behind me, sliding the lock into place with a reassuring click, I leaned against it and took a deep breath. What had I done? What strange twist of fate had led me here, to this luxurious room in a stranger's home, having abandoned the future I'd been building for years? The bedroom was as elegant as the rest of the penthouse, a king-sized bed with crisp white linens, more floor-to-ceiling windows with the same spectacular view, an ensuite bathroom gleaming with marble and chrome. I set the bag on a bench at the foot of the bed and slowly sank down beside it. For the first time in hours, I was alone with my thoughts. They should have been chaotic, panicked. Instead, I felt an odd sense of clarity, as if emerging from deep water into sudden, brilliant sunlight. I'd been drowning by inches in my relationship with Mark, each day disappearing a little more beneath the weight of his expectations and disappointments. Tonight, I'd chosen to save myself. I opened the overnight bag to find everything I might need: silk pajamas that looked close to my size, toiletries in expensive packaging, even a simple dress and undergarments for tomorrow, all tasteful, nothing presumptuous or overly intimate. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lisa. Mark just called me, totally freaking out. Said you left with some guy from the restaurant? Are you okay? Call me. I hesitated, then typed, I'm safe. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Please don't worry. Setting the phone aside, I moved to the window and looked out at the glittering cityscape. Somewhere out there was my apartment, my job, my carefully constructed life. And here I was, in a stranger's penthouse, feeling more alive than I had in years. What are you doing, Emma? I whispered to my reflection in the glass. The woman who stared back looked different somehow. Eyes brighter, posture straighter, like someone waking from a long sleep. Whatever happened tomorrow, one thing was certain. I wouldn't be the same person who had walked into that restaurant tonight. For better or worse, something had changed. Something fundamental and irreversible. Outside the locked door, I heard Dominic moving about the apartment, his voice a low murmur as he spoke on the phone. A man I barely knew, yet who had somehow seen me more clearly in one evening than Mark had in 2 years. I turned away from the window and began to get ready for bed, knowing sleep would likely elude me. Tomorrow would bring consequences, decisions, reality. But for tonight, in this strange, suspended moment between my old life and whatever came next, I allowed myself to simply breathe. For tonight, that was enough. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the guest room in a golden glow. For a moment, I lay disoriented, the silk sheets and unfamiliar ceiling confusing me. Then reality rushed back. The restaurant, Mark's humiliation, Dominic's offer, my choice. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding as I took in my surroundings in the clear light of day. What had seemed like a dream last night, this luxurious room in a stranger's penthouse, was undeniably real. My phone on the nightstand showed 15 missed calls from Mark and a flurry of increasingly desperate texts. "Emma, this is insane. Come home now. Do you have any idea who that man is?" "I've called the police. This is kidnapping." The last message made me freeze. Had Mark really gone to the police? I hadn't been kidnapped. I'd gone willingly. But how would that look to outsiders? A soft knock at the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Emma?" Dominic's voice, low and measured. "There's coffee and breakfast when you're ready. No rush." "Thank you," I called back, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "I'll be out soon." I showered quickly in the marble bathroom, the water pressure perfect, and the expensive toiletries leaving my skin scented with jasmine. The dress from the overnight bag fit well, a simple navy wrap dress that was both modest and flattering. I brushed my hair with the provided brush, applied minimal makeup, and took a deep breath before unlocking the door. The penthouse looked different in daylight, less intimidating, though no less impressive. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting details I'd missed last night: artwork on the walls, books lining built-in shelves, a few personal photographs in silver frames. Dominic stood at the kitchen island, dressed in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. No jacket, no visible weapon today. He looked up as I entered, his dark eyes assessing me with that same intensity I remembered from last night. "You slept well?" he asked, pouring coffee into a mug and offering it to me. "Better than I expected," I admitted, accepting the coffee and inhaling its rich aroma. "Thank you for the clothes and things," he nodded, gesturing toward the dining table where an assortment of breakfast foods waited: fresh fruit, pastries, eggs. "Help yourself. You must be hungry." I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment. We sat across from each other at the table, the silence surprisingly comfortable, as I ate a croissant and sipped the excellent coffee. "Mark's been texting me," I finally said. "He says he called the police." Dominic didn't look concerned. "He's bluffing. A man like him wouldn't want the scrutiny." "What do you mean?" "I had my people look into him last night." Dominic's voice was casual, but his eyes were watchful. "Your fiancé has some creative accounting practices at his law firm. Nothing that would interest me, but certainly something he wouldn't want discovered during a police investigation." I set my coffee down, unsettled. "You investigated him." "I investigate everyone who might be a threat." He held my gaze. "It's necessary in my position." There it was again, that subtle reference to who he was, what he did. I gathered my courage and asked directly, "Are you going to tell me what that position is exactly? Why you have bodyguards and can investigate people overnight?" Dominic considered me for a long moment. "I run various businesses in this city, some legitimate, some in gray areas, as I mentioned. I have enemies. I take precautions." His expression softened slightly. "But none of that should concern you." "It does concern me if I'm sitting in your apartment while the police might be looking for me." "No one is looking for you, Emma." His certainty was both reassuring and unnerving. "But if you're worried, call your friend. Lisa, was it? Let her know you're safe. You can meet her somewhere public if that would make you feel better." The suggestion surprised me. I'd half expected him to try to keep me isolated. "I can leave?" Something like hurt flashed in his eyes, quickly masked. "You were never a prisoner here, Emma. I told you last night, this is your choice." I nodded slowly, processing his words. "I should call Lisa, and I need to figure out what to do about everything." "About Mark, you mean?" "Yes." I traced the rim of my coffee cup with my fingertip. "I can't go back to him. I knew that even before last night, I think. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." Dominic's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flash of satisfaction in his eyes. "You have somewhere to stay? Friends? Family?" "Lisa would take me in." I hesitated. "I'll need to get my things from the apartment." "I can have someone accompany you," he offered immediately, "to ensure there are no complications." The idea of returning to the apartment I'd shared with Mark made my stomach twist with anxiety. Having someone with me, someone connected to Dominic, would make it less frightening, but it would also deepen my connection to this man I barely knew, this man who clearly operated outside the boundaries of normal society. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I think Lisa can come with me. Mark's usually at work during the day." Dominic nodded, though I sensed he wasn't entirely pleased. "As you wish." He reached into his pocket and produced a business card, sliding it across the table to me. It was simple. Just his name and a phone number, no company or title. "Call this number any time, day or night." I took the card, our fingers brushing briefly. That same electric current from last night passed between us, making my breath catch. "Thank you for everything." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "This isn't goodbye, Emma." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "No, I don't think it is." Something like relief softened his features. "Good." A discreet knock at the door broke the moment. One of Dominic's men entered after his acknowledgement. They spoke briefly in what sounded like Italian before the man nodded and withdrew. "I apologize," Dominic said, rising from the table. "Business that can't wait. Michael will drive you wherever you need to go when you're ready." "Michael?" "My driver. He can be trusted completely." I nodded, feeling a strange reluctance to leave despite the uncertainty of my situation. "I should get going. Lisa will be worried." Dominic walked me to the door, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow made me more aware of him than if he'd stood closer. "Emma," he said as I was about to leave, "remember what I said last night. You're worth more than he ever recognized." His words warmed something inside me that had been cold for too long. I'm starting to believe that. A smile. Genuine. Transforming his serious face. Good. That's the first step. Michael, the driver from last night, waited beside the elevator. He was younger than I'd realized, perhaps in his early 30s, with a quiet competence about him. He nodded politely as Dominic introduced us. "Take Ms. Bennett wherever she wishes to go," Dominic instructed. "Ensure she arrives safely." "Of course, sir." I stepped into the elevator, turning to face Dominic one last time. He stood in the doorway of his penthouse, powerful and enigmatic, watching me with those dark, intense eyes. "I'll call you," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. He nodded once, satisfaction evident in his expression. "I know." The elevator doors closed, and I leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. Less than 24 hours had passed since our eyes had met across that restaurant, yet everything had changed. I felt like a different person, both more vulnerable and somehow stronger than I'd been yesterday. Michael maintained a respectful silence as we descended to the garage below the building. The same sleek black car from last night waited, its engine purring to life as we approached. "Where to, Ms. Bennett?" Michael asked as he held the door open for me. I gave him Lisa's address, settling into the plush leather seat. As we pulled out of the garage into the bright morning sun, I felt a curious mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. For the first time in years, my future was unwritten. My phone buzzed. Lisa again. "Emma." "Call me right now, or I'm filing a missing persons report." I dialed her number, bracing myself for her reaction. "Emma, oh my God, are you okay? Where are you?" Her voice was frantic with worry. "I'm fine, Lisa. Better than fine, actually. I'm on my way to your place. Can I stay with you for a few days?" "Of course you can. But what the hell happened? Mark is losing his mind. He showed up at my door at midnight looking for you." I glanced at Michael, who was studiously focusing on driving, giving me the illusion of privacy. "It's a long story. I'll explain everything when I get there." "Are you really okay?" Her voice softened with concern. "You sound different." "I am different." I watched the city pass by outside the window. I finally woke up. After hanging up, I sat quietly, trying to organize my thoughts. How could I explain what had happened to Lisa? How could I make sense of it myself? I'd left my fiancé and spent the night in a stranger's penthouse, a stranger who was almost certainly involved in organized crime. It sounded insane, even in my own head, yet I couldn't deny the sense of rightness that had settled over me. Walking away from Mark didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like I'd finally stopped making the mistake I'd been living for years. The car slowed as we approached Lisa's apartment building in a modest neighborhood across town. Michael pulled smoothly to the curb and turned to me. Ms. Bennett, I've been instructed to give you this. He handed me a small envelope, and to remind you that Mr. Russo's offer of assistance remains open, should you need anything at all. I took the envelope, oddly touched by the formality. Thank you, Michael. He nodded, his expression professional but kind. It was a pleasure meeting you, Miss Bennett. I hope to see you again. The words carried a weight beyond simple courtesy, as if he too expected our paths to cross again. I thanked him once more before exiting the car, clutching my purse and the mysterious envelope as I walked to Lisa's building. She was waiting at the door, her expression a mixture of concern and burning curiosity. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward, enveloping me in a fierce hug. You scared me to death. She pulled back to examine my face. Are you really okay? Mark was saying crazy things. Something about you leaving with some dangerous man. I'm fine. I smiled, realizing it was true. And yes, I did leave with someone, but it's not what you think. I glanced back at the black car, still idling at the curb. Michael raised a hand in a subtle salute before driving away. Can we go inside? I'll tell you everything. Once in her apartment, surrounded by the comfortable clutter of Lisa's life, I opened the envelope Michael had given me. Inside was a key card and a note in elegant handwriting. The penthouse is yours if you need sanctuary. No strings attached. Lisa peered over my shoulder. Okay, you need to start explaining. Right now. I took a deep breath, tucking the key card safely into my purse. It started last night at dinner with Mark. As I recounted the events of the previous evening, watching Lisa's eyes grow wider with each revelation, I realized that my life had irrevocably changed course. Whatever happened next, whether I ever saw Dominic again or not, I had finally chosen my own path, and for now, that was enough. You're telling me that this guy, this complete stranger, just swooped in, punched Mark, and whisked you away to his penthouse? Lisa's voice rose with each word, her coffee forgotten on the table between us. And you're just okay with that? We sat in her small kitchen, the afternoon sun filtering through the blinds. I'd spent the last hour recounting the events of the previous evening, watching Lisa's expressions shift from shock to concern to fascination. When you put it that way, it sounds insane, I admitted, tracing the rim of my mug. But Lisa, you didn't see how Mark was treating me. You haven't seen it for months. Her expression softened. I knew things weren't great, but you always brushed it off when I asked. I was embarrassed. The admission hurt, bringing a flush to my cheeks. I didn't want anyone to know how bad it had gotten, how small he made me feel. Lisa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Oh, Em. You could have told me. I know, I struggled to find the words. I think part of me didn't want to admit it to myself, that I'd chosen someone who treated me that way, that I was staying. And this Dominic guy saw it immediately? I nodded, remembering the intensity in his dark eyes. He saw everything. It was like he could read all the things I'd been hiding. Lisa leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. And you're sure he's not just some rich creep with a white knight complex, swooping in to save you for his own agenda? The question was fair, one I'd asked myself repeatedly since leaving his penthouse. I don't know him, not really, I admitted, but he didn't pressure me for anything. He gave me a place to stay, no strings attached. I pulled out the key card he'd sent with Michael. He's still giving me space, see? Lisa examined the key card, her brow furrowed. Emma, be honest with me. Do you think this guy is involved in something illegal? I hesitated, remembering the bodyguards, the shoulder holster, the way people deferred to him. Probably, I finally said. But I don't know details, and he didn't offer any. That's concerning. I know. I took a deep breath. But right now, I need to focus on getting my things from the apartment and figuring out what comes next. One crisis at a time. Lisa nodded, practical as always. We'll go tomorrow while Mark's at court. I can borrow my brother's truck. She gave me a searching look. Are you going to call this Dominic guy? The question hung in the air between us. I thought about the business card in my purse, the way my fingers had itched to dial that number the moment I'd left his presence. I don't know, I lied. Lisa's expression told me she wasn't fooled, but she didn't press the issue. Well, you can stay here as long as you need. The sofa pulls out. That night, lying on Lisa's surprisingly comfortable sofa bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the past 24 hours. My phone sat on the coffee table, silent now. Mark had finally stopped calling and texting after I'd sent a brief message. I'm safe. I need space. Please don't contact me for a while. Beside my phone lay Dominic's business card. The embossed lettering caught the moonlight filtering through the window, seeming to glow faintly in the darkness. I reached out and traced his name with my fingertip, remembering the intensity of his gaze, the certainty in his voice when he'd said, "This isn't goodbye." Before I could second-guess myself, I picked up my phone and typed his number into a new message. Thank you for the key card. I'm staying with Lisa for now. Emma. I hit send before I could change my mind, then set the phone down, my heart racing inexplicably. I didn't expect a response, not at this hour, but barely a minute later, my phone buzzed. I'm glad you're safe. The offer stands. Anytime. Sleep well, little bird. The nickname sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder of the note he'd passed me at the restaurant. Your cage has a door, little bird. The question is whether you're brave enough to fly. I set the phone aside without responding, but I fell asleep with his words echoing in my mind. The next day dawned clear and cool. Lisa had taken the morning off work to help me retrieve my things from the apartment. We drove across town in her brother's pickup truck, my anxiety mounting with each familiar street we passed. We'll be in and out in an hour, Lisa assured me, squeezing my hand. He'll never know we were there, but as we rounded the corner to my street, my heart sank. Mark's BMW was parked in its usual spot. He's supposed to be in court, I whispered, panic rising in my throat. Lisa slowed the truck. Want to abort? We can try again tomorrow. I closed my eyes, imagining another day of wearing borrowed clothes, another day of feeling untethered from my own life. Then I thought of Dominic's words, "You're worth more than he ever recognized." No, I said, opening my eyes with new resolve. I need my things. He can't stop me from taking what's mine. Lisa gave me an appraising look, then nodded. That's my girl. She parked the truck and turned to me. I've got your back, Em. Always. Mark opened the door before I could use my key. He looked terrible. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, still wearing yesterday's clothes. For a moment, seeing him so disheveled, I felt a pang of guilt. Then he spoke. Where the hell have you been? His voice was cold despite the evident emotion on his face. Do you have any idea what you've done? Lisa stepped forward, positioning herself slightly in front of me. She's here for her things, Mark, that's all. He ignored her, his eyes fixed on me. You left with him. After he assaulted me. Do you know who he is, Emma? Do you have any idea? I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze directly. I know he treated me with more respect in one evening than you have in months. Mark's face contorted with disbelief. Respect? Dominic Russo doesn't know the meaning of the word. He's a criminal, Emma. His family runs half the illegal operations in this city. Russo. I finally had Dominic's full name. The confirmation of what I'd suspected, his connection to organized crime, should have frightened me. Instead, I felt strangely calm. I'm not here to discuss him, I said steadily. I'm here for my clothes, my books, and my mother's jewelry. Then I'll be gone. Mark's expression hardened. You think it's that simple? You embarrass me in public, disappear for a night, and then just walk back in here like nothing happened? No, I said quietly. I think it's that simple because our relationship is over, Mark. It has been for a long time. We both know it. Something in my tone, a certainty that hadn't been there before, made him pause. He studied my face, perhaps seeing for the first time the change that had come over me. He's gotten into your head, he finally said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. One night with that thug, and you've thrown away everything we built. We didn't build anything, Mark. You controlled, and I submitted. That's not a relationship. I stepped forward, no longer afraid of his reaction. Now I'm getting my things. You can either help or stay out of the way. But you can't stop me. For a tense moment, I thought he might refuse, might try to physically prevent me from entering. Then his shoulders slumped, and he stepped aside. Fine. Take what's yours. But when he's done with you, when you see what he really is, don't come crawling back. I walked past him into the apartment that had been my home for the past year. Everything looked the same, the neutral decor Mark had insisted on, the formal arrangement of furniture that had never felt comfortable, yet it all seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating. Lisa followed me, shooting Mark a warning glance as she passed. Together, we moved efficiently through the rooms, collecting my clothes, books, and personal items. I felt Mark's eyes on me the entire time, but he remained silent, watching from the doorway. In his bedroom, I retrieved my mother's jewelry box from the back of the closet, checking that the pearl necklace she'd worn on her wedding day was still inside. The sight of it brought unexpected tears to my eyes. What would she think of my choices? Of where I found myself now? I closed the box gently, tucking it into my bag. Whatever she would have thought, I knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't have wanted me to disappear piece by piece in a relationship that diminished rather than nurtured me. As we carried the last of my boxes to the truck, Mark finally spoke again. "This is a mistake, Emma. You're making the biggest mistake of your life." I paused, turning to face him one last time. "No, Mark. Staying with you would be the mistake. I'm finally correcting it." His face hardened. "You think he cares about you? Men like Dominic Russo don't care about anyone. You're just a new toy to him." I flinched, the words hitting a vulnerable spot. Was that all I was to Dominic? A momentary distraction? A woman he'd seen being mistreated and decided to rescue on a whim? "Goodbye, Mark," I said, refusing to engage further. "I wish you well." He laughed bitterly. "Right. Tell that to your new boyfriend. I'm sure he wishes me well too." I turned away without responding, climbing into the passenger seat of the truck as Lisa started the engine. We pulled away from the curb, leaving Mark standing alone on the sidewalk, a small figure growing smaller in the side mirror. "You okay?" Lisa asked softly as we turned the corner. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. "Yeah, better than I've been in a long time, actually." "So," she glanced at me sideways. "Dominic Russo, huh? That's a name I've heard before." "Me too," I admitted, remembering snippets of news stories over the years. Charity galas, business openings, the occasional vague reference to investigations that never seemed to lead anywhere. "But I don't know much about him. Maybe that's for the best." Lisa's tone was gentle but concerned. Whatever this is, just be careful, okay?" I nodded, staring out the window as the city passed by. "I will be." But even as I said it, I knew I'd already crossed a line. That night at the restaurant, when our eyes had met across the room, something had been set in motion that I wasn't sure I could, or wanted to stop. Back at Lisa's apartment, surrounded by the boxes and bags that contained the physical remnants of my life, I took out my phone and typed another message. "Got my things from the apartment. Mark was there. He mentioned your last name." This time, Dominic's response came immediately. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" The concern in those simple words warmed me. "I'm fine." Lisa was with me. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Have dinner with me tomorrow. There are things you should know." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. This was the moment to step back, to create distance from this dangerous, compelling man who had upended my life in the space of a night. The smart choice. The safe choice. Instead, I typed, "What time?" "Dinner with Dominic." The words echoed in my mind as I stood before Lisa's bathroom mirror, scrutinizing my appearance. I'd chosen the nicest outfit from the clothes I'd retrieved, a simple black dress that Mark had always dismissed as too plain. Now I appreciated its elegant simplicity, the way it skimmed my curves without clinging. "You sure about this?" Lisa leaned against the doorframe, concern etched on her face. "No," I admitted, applying a final touch of lipstick. "But I'm going anyway. At least you're meeting him at a restaurant. Public place. Smart move." I nodded. Though Dominic had offered to send a car, I'd insisted on meeting him at Aurelio's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. Part of me wanted to maintain some control over the situation, to have the option of walking away if needed. "Don't wait up," I told Lisa, grabbing my purse. "I have my key. Just be careful, Em." She squeezed my arm. "And call me if you need anything at all." The taxi dropped me at Aurelio's precisely at 8. The restaurant was housed in a renovated historical building, its facade elegant and understated. Inside, warm lighting and the gentle notes of a live piano created an atmosphere of refined intimacy. "May I help you, ma'am?" The maître d' approached with a polite smile. "I'm meeting someone," I began, but was interrupted. "Ms. Bennett." He nodded with immediate recognition. "Mr. Russo is expecting you. This way, please." As I followed him through the restaurant, I noticed the subtle nods of acknowledgement directed at us from staff and several diners. Not the obsequious fawning I might have expected, but something more profound. A quiet respect tinged with wariness. Dominic rose as we approached a secluded corner table. The sight of him sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie tonight, a concession to casual elegance that somehow made him more approachable than he'd appeared at La Riviera. "Emma." My name on his lips sounded like both greeting and caress. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." I allowed him to pull out my chair, hyper-aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of his cologne. As I sat, I noticed we were in a quieter section of the restaurant, away from the main dining area, with a clear view of both entrances. Even here, he was strategic. "Wine?" he offered as a waiter appeared silently at his gesture. "Just water for now, please." Dominic ordered for us both, a sparkling water for me, a glass of red wine for himself. Once the waiter departed, he leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes studying my face. "You're nervous," he observed. "Wouldn't you be?" I countered, smoothing my napkin across my lap. "I'm having dinner with a man who may or may not be connected to organized crime, who punched my ex-fiancé 2 days ago, and who seems to know more about me than should be possible after one chance encounter." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "When you put it that way, I'm surprised you came at all." "So am I admitted. "But you did." His expression grew serious. "Because you want answers." "Yes." Our drinks arrived, providing a brief respite from the intensity of his gaze. I took a sip of water, gathering my thoughts. "You mentioned there were things I should know," I finally said. Dominic nodded, swirling the wine in his glass without drinking. "I believe in transparency, Emma, at least as much as my position allows." "Your position in the Russo family," I clarified, watching his reaction. If he was surprised by my directness, he didn't show it. "Yes." "I'm sure your ex told you about my family's reputation. He suggested you're involved in illegal activities. Some of my family's businesses operate outside conventional law. Yes." Dominic's voice remained calm, matter of fact. "I won't insult your intelligence by claiming otherwise." His honesty was both unsettling and refreshing after Mark's constant manipulations and half-truths. "And what exactly does that mean for someone like me? Someone who's involved with you?" Dominic's gaze sharpened at my choice of words. "Are we involved, Emma?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I'm sitting here, aren't I?" A smile, slow and genuine, transformed his serious face. "Yes, you are." He leaned back slightly. "To answer your question, my world is complex. There are parts of it I keep separate from my personal life, but I won't pretend there aren't risks." "Risks," I repeated, thinking of the bodyguards I'd seen, the gun he carried. "Physical risks?" "I have enemies," he acknowledged. "But anyone close to me is protected, fiercely." Something flashed in his eyes, something possessive and primal. "Your safety would be my highest priority." The waiter returned to take our orders. Dominic suggested the restaurant's specialties, a burrata appetizer, followed by handmade pasta for me and osso buco for him. I nodded my agreement, finding it easier to defer to his knowledge of the menu than to pretend my mind wasn't reeling from our conversation. Once we were alone again, I forced myself to ask the question that had been haunting me. "Why me, Dominic?" Of all the women you could have rescued, why did you choose me? He was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. I told you before, I recognized something in you. A strength beneath the vulnerability. He took a sip of his wine. My mother was like that. Quiet, underestimated. My father misused her kindness, treated it as weakness. By the time I was old enough to understand, to intervene, she was diminished. Pain flickered across his features. I swore I would never stand by again while someone was treated that way. So I remind you of your mother? The thought was oddly disappointing. No. His voice was firm. You remind me of who she might have been. Had someone seen her worth before it was too late? His eyes met mine. But that's only part of it. What's the rest? The corner of his mouth lifted. Do you believe in fate, Emma? I don't know, I answered honestly. I never used to. Nor did I. But sometimes... He paused as our appetizer arrived. Once the waiter had gone, he continued. Sometimes two lives align in ways that can't be explained by chance. When I saw you in that restaurant, something shifted. I felt it. I wanted to dismiss his words as practiced charm, the kind of line a powerful man might use on a woman he desired. But the intensity in his eyes, the slight hesitation in his usually confident manner, these suggested sincerity. I felt it too, I admitted softly. Dominic reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine in a touch so light it might have been imagined. Then perhaps that's all we need to know for now. We ate our appetizer in companionable silence, the tension between us shifting from uncertainty to something more like anticipation. When he asked about my work at the library, I found myself opening up, describing my love of books, the peace I found in organizing knowledge, helping people discover new worlds through reading. You light up when you talk about it, he observed. It's beautiful to watch. No one had ever described my passion for my modest job as beautiful before. Mark had always treated it as a quaint hobby, something to be tolerated until I found a real career, or more likely, became a full-time wife. What about you? I asked as our main courses arrived. What parts of your work bring you satisfaction? He considered the question seriously. Protection, he finally said. Ensuring the safety and prosperity of those under my care. My family, my employees, my community. The methods might be unconventional, but the goal is always security. Is that how you see what happened with Mark and me? You were protecting me? At first, perhaps, Dominic twirled pasta around his fork. But it quickly became something more specific. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. What? His eyes met mine, dark and serious. Possibility. The word hung between us, laden with meaning. I felt it too. That sense of standing on a precipice, of a door opening to something both frightening and exhilarating. This isn't simple, is it? I said quietly. Whatever this is between us. No, he agreed. Simple is overrated. We finished our meal talking about lighter topics, books we'd read, places we'd traveled, the history of the restaurant around us. Dominic was surprisingly well-read, quoting poetry and discussing classical literature with the ease of someone who had received an excellent education. I found myself relaxing, enjoying his company beyond the dangerous allure he exuded. After dessert, a tiramisu we shared, Dominic signaled for the check. May I drive you home or... He hesitated. Something he rarely seemed to do. Would you like to come back to the penthouse? Just to talk, he added quickly. The view of the city at night is spectacular. I should have said no. Should have asked him to drive me back to Lisa's. Should have taken more time to process everything I'd learned. Instead, I heard myself say, I'd like to see the view. The satisfaction in his eyes made my heart skip. My car is waiting outside. This time, there was no bodyguard in the front seat. Just Dominic and me in the back of his sleek black car as it glided through the nighttime streets. We sat close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, though he didn't touch me. Mark called me today, I said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. He left a voicemail warning me about you again. Dominic's jaw tightened. What did he say? That you were dangerous, that I didn't know what I was getting into. I turned to look at him directly. Was he right? Dominic met my gaze unflinchingly. Yes, he said simply. I am dangerous, Emma. To my enemies. To anyone who threatens what's mine. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. But never to you. Never. The certainty in his voice, the gentleness of his touch, they formed a contradiction that defined him. Dangerous, yet protective. Powerful, yet considerate. I believe you, I whispered, and realized I meant it. The car pulled into the now familiar garage beneath his building. As we rode the elevator to the penthouse, a tension built between us, electric and undeniable. When the doors opened directly into his foyer, I stepped out tentatively, suddenly hyper-aware of the implications of being alone with him. Dominic seemed to sense my nervousness. Wine? He offered, moving toward the kitchen to give me space. Please. I wandered to the wall of windows while he opened a bottle. The city sparkled below, a carpet of light stretching to the horizon. It was a view that represented everything Dominic was, elevated, powerful, removed from the ordinary world yet overseeing it. Beautiful, isn't it? He appeared beside me, offering a glass of red wine. Breathtaking, I agreed, taking the glass. Our fingers brushed, sending that now familiar current through me. Emma. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. I want to be clear about something. I turned to face him, finding him closer than I'd expected. What's that? I didn't bring you here with expectations. His eyes searched mine. Whatever happens between us, whatever you want to happen, it's your choice. Always. The power he gave me in that moment, the control he willingly surrendered, moved me more deeply than any declaration could have. This man, who commanded respect and fear from others, was offering me the freedom to determine the course of whatever was developing between us. I set my wine glass on a nearby table and stepped closer to him. What if I choose this? I whispered, reaching up to touch his face. Dominic remained perfectly still, his eyes darkening. Are you certain? In answer, I rose on tiptoe and pressed my lips to his. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his arms encircled me, pulling me against him as he deepened the kiss. His mouth was warm and insistent against mine, passionate yet controlled, as if he was holding back, letting me set the pace. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against mine. You're sure? He asked again, his voice rough with desire. I'm sure, I whispered. I want this. I want you. His response was immediate. He lifted me into his arms as if I weighed nothing, carrying me through the penthouse to his bedroom. There, beneath the city lights filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, we surrendered to the connection that had sparked the moment our eyes had met across that restaurant. Hours later, lying in his arms, my head resting on his chest, I traced the tattoo over his heart, a stylized shield with a single star in its center, surrounded by intricate designs. Family crest? I murmured, still languid from our lovemaking. Of sorts. His fingers played idly with my hair. A symbol of protection, of honor. I propped myself up on one elbow to look at him. In the dim light, his face was softer. The sharp edges of his public persona smoothed away. Will you tell me something honestly? He nodded, his expression growing serious. Is this real? Or am I just... I hesitated, voicing my deepest fear. A novelty? Someone different from the women you usually pursue? Dominic sat up, bringing me with him, his hands cradling my face. Emma, listen to me. His voice was low, intense. What I feel for you, what I've felt since that first moment, it's unlike anything I've experienced before. This isn't a game. It isn't temporary. His thumb stroked my cheeks. You're mine now, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness of his words should have alarmed me. Instead, they filled a void I hadn't realized existed, a longing to belong, to be valued, to be seen. Yours, I whispered, and sealed the promise with a kiss. In the morning, waking in his bed to the soft glow of dawn, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made my choice. The path ahead would not be simple. Dominic's world was complex, sometimes dangerous, far removed from the quiet life I'd imagined for myself. But as he stirred beside me, his arm tightening around my waist, I recognized the truth that had been growing since that fateful dinner. Sometimes freedom means flying from one cage into the unknown. Sometimes salvation wears the face of danger. And sometimes, the greatest risk of all is refusing to take a chance on an unexpected love. Dominic's eyes opened, finding mine immediately. A smile curved his lips as he pulled me closer. "Good morning, little bird," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "Good morning," I replied, settling against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever adjustments our different worlds would require, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer invisible. In Dominic's eyes, dark, dangerous, devoted, I was seen, valued, protected. And for the first time in years, I was truly free.